All right, we're back for part two of this Earth Works conversation with Grant Maundrell. And we looked at some of your work in the last clips. And now we'll talk about how you actually did that.
Yep.
And with that comes this third video that you sent me. Let me find that. That is in media player. Get out of here. Go to downloads.
The storm is coming in here.
As planned or
Yeah.
as expected.
If we have a blackout, I apologize.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Share. Can you see your video now? It's loading. There
Yep.
we go. This. All right, so what we have here is you in the excavator. What kind of excavator is this?
So that's a 5-ton excavator. Pretty standard sort of earth moving machine.
Mm-hmm. You got like a bucket here, a scoop on the end.
Yeah, the ground was soft enough where I could just use a pretty standard mud bucket. If you've got particularly hard or rocky ground, you might have to have a bucket with some teeth or a smaller bucket. Um, that's just going to be dependent on your soil structure, etc. But obviously, the bigger bucket you can use, the quicker you'll be because you're sort of digging more at any given time. But yeah, I've used smaller buckets. We've used sifting buckets.
Now,
With
did you choose this bucket in the sense of like one scoop, one basically just one scoop per section of swale? Like scoop it once and then that's that, move on. Scoop once, move.
well, that's sort of how it worked out, roughly speaking. But again, you're going to use you know, in a excuse me, in without going to the extreme, you're going to use the biggest bucket you can use efficiently given the texture of the soil. Like if you're on really rocky, hard, compacted ground, you're probably not going to use that bucket and that machine because you'd just be scraping the ground rather than actually being able to dig into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the teeth can sort of bite in and you get a bit more purchase. It just depends, but that's sort of a standard mud bucket for the 5-ton excavator. I think it's about 4 foot wide, and yeah, it did work quite efficiently in what we were doing. In the size of swale we were digging, we were able to just sort of do one sweep and plus a bit of touch up for that 4 foot section, essentially.
So are you at the very beginning of the swale? Here it looks like some catchment on this concrete surface or gravel, whatever that is over there.
So, so it's a bit deceptive. That shed is a new shed and it was cut in. So there's actually a bit of a cut on this side, on the viewer's side of the shed, where
Mhm.
that window is in it, you can
Yeah.
see. And there's a drainage channel coming from, as we look on the screen, from right to left at the top of that cut. and it's moves down, and our swale intervenes that. So that water that comes draining down the top of that cut is now being redirected into this swale, and which we've already started. And you can see Phil standing in what we've already dug. And we'll continue along towards where Alfie the dog is standing. You can actually just see to the left of Alfie, right on his shoulder, there's a pink dot in the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing we did. We got our laser level, yeah, right there. So what we did first is we went right with our laser level and our spray paint. You can use whatever marking you want to do. Some people stick little sticks in the ground. It doesn't matter however you want to mark it. And we go and mark at it's about 5 meters. So what's that? 15 feet intervals. We'll put a dot that we've marked with the laser level to be the exact same level. So that's basically the path that we're taking with our contour, and then with the machine we're joining the dots. That's all we're
Okay, so
doing.
we got Phil standing there, and you see there's something on a tripod to the right, and then Phil's holding like a staff, and
Yeah, so that's
that's
the laser. That's the laser level. So the laser level on the tripod, that sends out a red laser beam perfectly on a level horizontal plane.
Mhm.
And on the staff that Phil's holding is a receiver that will receive that red laser beam at that precise level. So what we can do is set the staff on the point we want to start at, and then put the receiver up as far up the staff as we require to hit that red laser beam perfectly. And then wherever on the landscape we put the staff and it still receives that red laser beam accurately, means that it's the exact same level point as our starting point. And so we can continue. That's how we draw in those pink dots. We're able to just go along. Yep, right here, pink dot, move along 5 meters. Yep, up a little bit, down the hill a little bit, whatever. Right here, another dot, continue on. And that's giving you, those dots are all on exactly the same level. So when we come and dig our swale and join the dots, we've translated the swale to be perfectly level.
Okay. So as far as the staff that Phil's holding, you set that to the height because that's an adjustable. It goes up and down.
Yep.
And then you set it, you lock it, and then basically you're not going to move that. You're going to move the whole thing until it, what does it beep when it's like the right, when it connects with the
That's right.
laser?
It beeps intermittently if you're slightly high or slightly low, and then it's a continual beep when you've reached that precise level. And it's very accurate. Like, it's probably too accurate for what we're doing there. You can get to, like, 5 millimeter. I don't know what that is as a fraction of an inch, but extremely accurate if you need to. But certainly for our purposes, it's very accurate. And when we play the video, you'll see how it works at play as well. So he's then set it for the bottom of the swale. And when we play the video, which you probably, if you hit play now.
Okay. Does sound help? I'll turn it up a little.
No, we don't need the sound.
You don't
We
need
don't
the
need the
sound.
sound.
Okay.
So you can see here, I'm basically digging the high side, creating a sort of relatively flat bottom to the hole, and then the material I've collected forms the mound below. And that's me just adjusting it slightly. And And then what Phil's done, he's done a little bit of foot adjustments, and then he's now going to check it with the laser level by placing the staff there. He's like gonna, he's going, got to go down a little bit. He's just told me. So
Wait, I'm gonna
there we
stop it. I
go.
have a question for you.
Yep.
Um, so why is he measuring there? Did you already how deep you need to go? Is that why?
Yeah, I mean, I probably started at the very start and went, that's how deep I'd like to make it, and then
Mhm.
we've adjusted the the reader, the receiver on the staff to be to that depth rather than on top of the ground where the pink dot would have been. And then as I continue to dig, I'm just going to continually dig at that depth.
Okay, so yeah, so I just had a void filled in my understanding. So
That's
basically,
fine.
before you even bring in this excavator, it's just you with a bottle of spray paint and then
Yep.
the laser level, and you're
Yep.
marking those points every 15 or so feet.
Yep.
Now you reset the laser to the depth that you want the swale to be. And that's what he's actually checking. So you know how deep you need to dig.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't understand that at first, but yeah, now
No.
it makes
And
sense.
while we're on that topic, once you've dug the swale to that depth, the other thing that you could check is the top of the berm. So you could, because the other thing that if you wanted to be particularly precise with your spillways, you're going to have to set the, as the water fills it up, you want it to overflow the swale at a certain point, i.e. the spillway. You're going to have to get that level correct as well. But getting back to what we're doing, yes, what you just said is correct. And so you can see Phil now checking. He asked me to dig a bit further, and I just did. And then he's now checking it again. You'll have to hit play to
All right. I'm
see
just
how
going to
well
go
I did.
back. I'm going to go back a little bit because I just wanted
Yeah,
to see that once more. What Phil did is it looked like he tilted it down the staff. He tilted it down until it met the laser, and that's what's telling him you got to go deeper, right?
exactly.
Okay. And he's gonna give it a shot. He
Yes,
just
that's
told you a little deeper.
yeah. So I've obliged, dug a little bit deeper, then he'll check it again. He's giving me the thumbs up and tell me to move on.
And are you maneuvering within apple trees or something? Cherry
There's a whole
trees?
bunch of fruit trees. I think that's a peach tree that's right in front of the machine. Um, yeah, obviously I wasn't with the arm of the machine. I didn't want to take out a tree, but also when we were doing our pink dots, we're obviously not wanting the swale to go through where a tree is. So we had those immovable objects to deal with. So we
Mm-hmm.
had to pick a point, a starting point that would lead us through between the trees rather than going through one, crashing into one.
Now, if you go too low, you just does Phil just kick some dirt back in, or do you have to go back in and use the excavator and compact it a little bit? If you were to,
Yeah, I could
well,
put a bit more material back in off the berm.
mm-hmm.
Um, like I'm certainly don't call myself an earth mover. There's earth movers that are so accurate, so precise with what they do. and you're not going to have too many problems. I didn't have too many problems either. Mostly Phil was talking about an inch lower,
Mm-hmm.
and we're getting pretty close. And if you have the occasional spot that's slightly lower, that's not that big a deal. Over time, water and so forth will settle all this dirt we're disturbing to a point as well. The mound will get a bit smoother, the bottom will even out a little bit, sediment will get dropped in there. I think things will change slightly. But as long as we're not creating a point where water can't get past the lump, or we're creating this big cavernous hole that takes in a significantly larger amount of water, at that point we'll be okay. But we over 100 meters, so what's that, 110 yards, we had a variation of not even 2 inches.
Wow.
So that's it's about 2 inch. It was 50 millimeters, which is, I suppose that's maybe just shy of 2 inches. So that's fine. What we don't want is a foot difference, because then you'll find that, like, the water, particularly in a small rain event, the water will only go to one certain areas. It be evenly distributed.
But with a 1 or 2 inch, I mean, I would assume
That's
you have so much catchment to fill those things up. It's not gonna.
Well, we had the water filled up, as you saw in that previous video, by a foot. So whether it's an inch here or there is not gonna drastically change the effect of it.
How deep and wide did this swale end up being in your estimation?
These guys were a bit smaller because it just goes into this little food forest area, or future food forest area. But probably the base was tended to be 2 feet wide, and then the mound might have been 2 or 3 feet high from the bottom of the swale, and similar of 3 or 4 foot wide. I mean, Phil standing there gives you a bit of an idea of the scale of it. They're not we didn't do massive ones. So definitely I've seen bigger ones built in broader landscapes. If you've got the terrain's another factor too. Like, the steeper it is, the smaller they're going to have to be, because you can't create this big wide swale very easily on steep ground. I remember seeing Jeff Lawton and is it Neil Spackman, some other people doing swales in flat desert country in the Middle East and so forth. And the swales were I could have driven that excavator along the bottom of the swale. Like, they were massively broad. It's also in the context of when it rains, they want to capture everything, and it's often a flash flooding sort of situation. So they're wanting to have these big catchments taken in by the swale. So you don't want to make them too small. And again, on flatter country, you can afford to have a broader profile. So again, you can get bogged down in all of that. Something is better than nothing. So, I'm sure someone could turn around and say, oh, I should have made them slightly smaller or slightly bigger, or done it in a slightly different way. But it's going again, are we feeding those basic principles? Yes. Okay, well, good. We can fine tune it. That's fine.
Is there um uh the is there a reason, I'm sure there is, you mounded the dirt up on Phil's right side if it's from Phil's hand?
Yes, definitely. So that's the downhill side. It's probably a bit deceptive on the video here.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always digging on the uphill side, and so it's a classic cut and fill. So you're always cutting the uphill and filling on the downhill. That's all we're doing. So the excavator, you can see the lean on it. So you can see how
Yeah.
it's leaning to left of screen because that's downhill. So we're digging on the uphill side and depositing on the downhill side, and that's how we essentially remove the slope and create a flatter, or we remove that slope.
So at the end of the day, is the top of the mound that you create, the mound that you're making, is that going to be higher than the uphill side on Phil's left hand side?
Yeah, typically.
And then
Again, it probably depends on the if it was really steep. But if it's really steep, you're probably not going to be practically doing swales on it. But yes, I would say typically it's slightly higher.
if there was no orchard here
Yeah.
and you were cutting these swales for the sole purpose of making a food forest, where would you plant the trees? Can you plant them on the mound side or the mound side?
Well, again, depends on your climate, but
Mm,
typically, again, with gravity, the water that's collected by the swale is going to feed things downhill. So if you're wanting the trees to take advantage of that, they're going to be downhill of the swale. So, um, yeah, they're typically going to be on the mound or downhill from the mound. However, when we observed in the Greening in the Desert site, they planted in the swale. So where Phil's standing is basically where the trees were planted, or the initial trees were planted,
mhm.
because that's the wettest spot, going to be the wettest spot. And in a desert climate in Jordan, or even where you are in Arizona, there's merit to be planting in that zone potentially. In my climate here, I have planted slightly halfway up the mound, so just slightly to Phil's right or
Mhm.
left of screen of Phil. Um, to the success in our drought periods, but then I've lost a couple of trees if they haven't been far enough up that mound in a really wet period that we've just had. Sort of 2020 to 2022. A lot survived as well because they were just high enough. They weren't right in the swale. So again, it just depends on your climate
What's
and what
the
you.
risk? I mean, is it
Well, it's just you're
rot?
just managing how much water access the trees are getting. So if you're in a really wet climate, or a climate that say has snow and it's going to melt, and each spring you're going to get sort of this runoff into these swales or whatever, you're not going to plant directly in that swale. The fruit trees, for instance, are just going to get swamped out. But if you're in a desert, then maybe you do.
Yeah, so like in the situation we just saw, and I'll just go back to it real quick if I can. If I can. Not this. Am I still sharing? Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got standing water there, and you said it took how long to fully soak in?
A few days, but
Okay.
look, a tree would survive with standing water around it for 3 days, but it's more the root zone would take a while to get oxygen again
Mm.
to the point that would be sufficient for a lot of species of fruit trees.
And is that risk um higher in a climate like this, what we're watching here, just because it's getting more rain events? So it's like a tree
Yeah,
can
it's a
handle one flooding and it can soak for a while, but time after time, if it's getting hit week after week, that's when we're gonna damage the tree, basically.
yeah, exactly. And obviously there's many factors, the species of trees themselves. But yeah, it's mostly the climate. So if you've the higher the rainfall, the the less likely you are to put plant material in that swale.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jeff Lawton's practices at Zaytuna, where they're in a quite wet subtropical climate. He cuts swales, and the swales are like the paths. There's no plants in there. He's planted several meters below. But they're getting enough rainfall where it's charging the ground for a fair distance below that swale, consistently enough where you're going to very easily have productive treat systems. This is a slightly drier climate here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a significantly drier climate, I would say. They probably receive less than a third of the rainfall here than at Zaytuna.
Where is this? Just so we know.
So this is in New South Wales in Australia, near a town called Goulburn, which is sort of, I don't know how many kilometers. It's north of Canberra, the capital of Australia. It's probably about 100, 150 kilometers from the east coast of Australia. The latitude is, I'd say, 30, 33, 34. Not particularly high elevation, slight relative, yeah, few hundred meters elevation or something like that. They get quite frosty winters. They may get a snow event, maybe, probably not. And rainfall will be relatively evenly distributed through the year, but evaporation in summer is significantly higher, quite warm to hot sort of summers. So you're getting a lot more evaporation in the summer.
Back.
The
Go ahead.
rainfall is probably about 500 millimeters. So what's that in inches? Divided by
Yeah, I need to learn five. So 10 millimeter. Is it how many millimeters in a centimeter? 10, 100,
it's like 30 mil to an inch. So
30 mil to an inch.
yeah, divided by 30.
Well, you explained evenly distributed throughout the year, less than
Uh,
Zaytuna.
yeah, like 16 or 17 inches of rain.
Hmm. That's not that much,
No.
but definitely more than here. Cornville, we get 12,
Yeah, you're
whatever.
probably
Yeah.
hotter at Cornville as well.
Hmm.
So your evaporation be even higher in the summer. And in fact, your summers are well and truly hotter. Probably similar winter.
Just below freezing at night.
Yeah, so you're getting
Mm.
frosts. You're not getting consistent snow on the ground or anything like that. Um, but yeah.
Back to planting trees in the swale for like desert, specifically our place here. Does that mean you would only plant a tree in the swale, or could you plant trees outside of it as well? And I guess that depends on the tree, maybe.
Depends on the tree and the stage you're at. So I think initially you're going to be doing, again, this is what we observed at Greening the Desert in Jordan. The initial plantings were just in the swale, and they were very hardy desert trees, the prosopis. And then as the systems matured, the landscape's more hydrated, etc., you're able to venture out into less watered situations, um, and you would probably act accordingly as well. So you're probably not as bad as the starting point in Jordan, but so you might cut swales, plant things in it, and maybe a few things outside of it, below the swale. Um, but I think there's definitely would be a transition where you're not you're not planting everything that you ultimately want at the beginning,
Mhm.
because you're wanting to create a nicer, a better environment to plant a lot of material that you'd ultimately want to plant. And to do that, you're planting support species, you're hydrating the landscape, you're creating more soil with organic matter, humus, production, mulch, and all these things will allow you to succeed with less hardy plant material. We've had the same transition at my property where initially we couldn't plant citrus; it was too cold. We've created and too dry, and we've now successfully grown citrus trees here for a few years, but they're in under canopy of trees. They're got a higher organic matter soil that's holding water a lot more. And I did plant citrus to begin with. They all just died the first winter. So I've planted citrus in almost the identical locations to my first failed plantings, and they've survived.
Wow.
So you're because you're at the start of your journey, you're going to citrus might be an example. You could probably ultimately grow citrus in Cornville, but if you just went and planted a lemon tree out in the middle of your property, it's not going to go so well in probably either extreme of season. But if you can imagine, it's under canopy, there's water harvesting going on, ground cover, etc. Then maybe when you put a citrus in there, you can get it to work.
100%. That's the goal. And for the record, for people, if this is the first video they've seen, of you and I Omina and I had a couple fruit trees, and I know you and I were going back and forth before planting them. Well, anyways, we ended up just planting them throughout the yard in different spaces. And I think there was 7 or 8 of them. They pretty much all die. I think they're all dead, except the plum tree, which we planted in the guild next to the prosopis with a bunch of ground cover and some other I don't know how much the comfrey right next to it had to do with the success, but we didn't water that tree at all from like July until now, and it's still green, and it got a lot of new growth. Like there was new branches, new
Well,
green branches.
you also had a water harvesting feature that
Yeah,
fed it,
yeah, filled up.
and that's probably the the most critical thing at this point.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Well, it just goes back to the point like you've made. Even the 3 trees at the bottom of the property that we ran irrigation lines to, we didn't have it on a timer or anything. We just would manually do it, and we didn't always remember to do it, but didn't cut it. It didn't cut it. It wasn't enough. And it's like, it goes back to what you're saying when you calculate how much water you get in a water harvesting feature versus running little drip lines to it. You can't even fathom the difference. It's like
no, no.
thousands of gallons difference.
And then also calculating the even with drip irrigation, some people, you can, well, drip irrigation is pretty good. You can put it under the surface of mulch and even compost and things. So you're not really losing anything to evaporation per se. But certainly overhead irrigation, there's a loss to evaporation and so forth. These water harvesting techniques that you're charging the groundwater, there's zero evaporation to water going through the ground profile. So, you can have the hottest, Cornville August conditions, and if that groundwater is still there, then it's not going anywhere.
And we only got less than 2 minutes left, but how is that thing? I mean, we only had a couple rainfalls. I could count it on one hand how many times that basin filled up, but it did. It filled up, and we haven't watered it manually at all since then, and it still looks like it's thriving. So my question is like, is there still groundwater in there, or can it just handle a little bit of dryness, or is it about to die? Or with a minute left, what do you think?
It's yeah, well, it's basically a combination. I think there's still groundwater there,
Mm-hmm.
and that has enabled the plants to handle a little bit of dryness. They're also probably sent roots down deeper rather than to the surface where the water source of irrigation is. And so that deeper root system is more resilient than one that's on the surface. This is, a lot of desert plants have very deep root systems. And this is why, because their best chance is to have access water, subterranean water.
It's amazing. We're about to get cut off here, Grant. Thanks for joining us on this second design chat of ours. And there's many more to come, hopefully. So thanks again for your
No worries, it's
time
been fun.
and knowledge. All right. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll be back again, 100%. Let's see here. This is House Mountain Ranch Design Chats. Thanks for watching.